Welcome to Wake Up Call for the Soul with Bill and Wendy. Hi, Bill.
Hi, Wendy.
Well, today we are talking about resistance. How do we resist? In our last episode, you began the conversation about way of being, and you spoke of it in terms of responsiveness and resistance.
Yep. And so in this episode, we're going to look to get a bit more specific about the dynamics involved when we make choices that are not aligned with the wholeness of our beings with responsiveness.
That sounds great. And what I like about this is they can even be subtle choices.
The choices that we make at the level of way of being are inherently subtle. They're so subtle in a lot of cases that we aren't even consciously aware that we are making those choices.
So that just means this conversation is for all of us.
Yeah, as far as I know, I'll let you know when I come across someone who doesn't have any resistance and is completely responsive.
All right, let's dig right in.
All right, so in the last episode, we talked about responsiveness being our natural way of being, our divinely inherited birthright of being.
The way we should be, in other words.
Yeah, the way we were designed to be, how we are wired to be naturally. And responsiveness is characterized by this approach to ourselves and others and all that is, for the most part, without illusion or significant distortion. And so it involves this perceiving, this being, this acting that's in harmony with what is, what we have defined as reality, which is very different from the projected pseudo-reality that I like to call the fabricated world of human invention. But we've been so traumatized by our experience in the harshness of the conditions on this planet. We've been indoctrinated to a large extent to spend a lot of our time existing in this, I'll call it a distortion field of the illusion of separation, which then leads to resistance. And so resistance is the opposite of responsiveness. And that's really what we're going to focus on in this episode is, well, how do we become resistant? How do we shift from our natural mode of being, of responsiveness, into this alternate reality of resistance?
So really, to become aware that we are resistant, because a lot of us don't want to believe that we are resistant to so many things. It is important to understand first that we truly are resistant in so many ways of our being in this world.
It goes back to this idea that has been a theme throughout the whole podcast, is this illusion of separation, that you can't actually have resistance unless you believe the lie that separation is real, that separation is more of a fundamental aspect of existence than unity, connection, relationship. And so resistance is really what I consider to be a defining characteristic of the fabricated world of human invention, because you separate and then you resist.
And you really can't make a change until you become aware of all the areas in which we exhibit resistance in our own lives.
I think it's helpful because so many of our episodes, maybe all of them, are a form of awareness or consciousness raising. And so the fact that so many people, we don't even know we're doing this, we don't really have a language for it, would suggest to me that perhaps more of us becoming aware of these dynamics might actually help us to wake up from them. Hence, why we're doing this episode and kind of this whole series of episodes around responsiveness, way of being, resistance.
Wake up call for the soul. So let's wake up to what is resistance.
Yeah. So this is kind of a recap from the last episode, but resistance is everything that comes from those aspects of us that have been infected or injured by the fabricated world of human invention. And so these parts haven't been healed, or they haven't been completely reintegrated into the wholeness of our beings. And so a key component of resistance for ourselves is that we talked about this last time, and we'll have to dig into it deeper now, is that a huge part of our resistance has to do with who we think we are and who we think we're not. Because the identity that we've constructed for ourselves is very small, it's very contained, and this, even though it doesn't reflect who we really are, it's familiar, it's comfortable, and so anything that challenges that sense of who we think we are is considered a threat to our existence. Our brains perceive it as a threat to our very survival. But what is actually threatened is usually our very limited sense of who we are, a kind of false or temporary identity, instead of the broader or more expansive, true beingness that we are as human beings, made in the likeness of divinity. And so another way of looking at resistance is it's looking to maintain the status quo of who we think we are and who we aren't. And anything that threatens that is perceived as a problem, dangerous, a risk, something that can threaten this construct that we've kind of built out of our material minds. And so resistance in its own way it's kind of a catch-all term for all of the false self-defense mechanisms that we have. So anytime that this false sense of who we are is threatened, then these defense systems really kick in and try to reestablish this dysfunctional equilibrium to where we can say, oh, my identity, who I think I am, is safe, aka my ego continues to survive. A lot of people use ego, and I'm using words like false identity, temporary identity. They're, to me, probably pretty much the same thing. It's not who we really are, it's who we think we are.
Well, maybe we need an example at this point, because that's a lot of broad, big concepts. I'm trying to figure out, like what you just said. I'm trying to digest what you just said. Resistance is about maintaining the status quo of who we are and aren't. I feel like I need an example of that.
We can engage in an example here. It's not what I call the best example, but it's a personal example, and it is a recent example. So I figured, and we are both participants in this example.
Ooh, okay.
So hopefully between the two of us, we can break that out a bit more. So I'm going to tell a story from my real life here with Wendy. And it demonstrates a few things, but there's some things that are really hidden within it that you have to dig in to see them. They're not as obvious. So here's the example. So lately, I spend a lot of time on Zoom in my office with people, whether I'm praying with them or engaged in collaborations, and Zoom is our primary communication.
Yes, you often have your door shut.
Yes, I have my door shut, and the door is closed, and then sometimes Wendy will crack open the door, and the door to the office where I'm working. And my sense of things is that in that moment, my soul knows that, well, Wendy's obviously doing this for some good reason. I don't know what it is. And my soul, most likely, even though I can't say I'm super conscious of this because of what follows, is most likely very curious about, I wonder why Wendy is opening the door at this time when I'm busy.
Because I might add, this is pretty rarely that I do this in the big scheme of all the times you're up there with the door shut.
This is very true. So in that moment, and this story, we'll break it down more in terms of what the Arbinger Institute calls a choice diagram. Well, we're not going to be drawing it out for you, but we're going to attempt to, in our own ways, verbally describe what's going on here. So in that moment, I have the choice to respond to Wendy's humanity, let's say, and simply be curious and wonder, I wonder why Wendy's opening the door, just keeping things very simple that way. But lately, what's been happening is not quite that, pretty much the opposite of it, what we might call resistance, where she opens the door and I have this sense, I switch. It's a very quick movement. And that's part of the reason why a lot of people don't even realize how much we're in resistance or how we get into it, because the shift is very subtle. It can be instantaneous, where I kind of get a little bit, I'll call it perturbed, impatient, like thinking to myself, why in the blank is she bothering me right now. She knows the door is closed and I'm in a meeting, blah, 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 and she's interrupting me. And why can't she value my time? And blah, blah, all these thoughts going on. I'm not saying I'm saying any of this stuff, but this stuff's going through my head. It's in some way, shape, or fashion.
Right, because the nasty look is just a look that you give me. And I don't even say anything because I'm subtly opening the door and pausing. I'm not making a big interruption, but there is something I needed to tell him.
Right. And this has happened multiple times. It's not just once. If it was once, yeah, but it's been multiple times. And so I have these feelings. I'm sort of impatient. And I guess the look is probably involves some form of anger or frustration or something like that. And, Wendy and I have talked about this, like what's going on with this. And I don't even know if I can claim to know exactly what it is, except I do know that it's resistance. Because again, if I was going from my soul, just be like, she's opening the door. This is interesting. I'll be curious and I can tell the people on the screen, hey guys, I got to attend to something here. Turn off my camera and my mic. I typically haven't done that. So what's happening here? And I feel that the Arbinger Institute is right about this, is that I'd like to think that there's a decent amount of time that I am fairly responsive to Wendy, you as a human being. But Wendy's also very familiar about that. There are many times when I'm not responsive to her as a human being and her humanity. And so the way the Arbinger Institute talks about it is that in that kind of microsecond, if we are already in a responsive mode, which that's questionable, but I'd like to think that I was, or that I had the potential to be. I mean, because if not, then where's the choice? I'm just a robot running programs, which actually that's a whole other way to look at resistance, which we can talk about. So when Wendy opens that door, in that instant that I become aware of that, I have this very fundamental choice in terms of my way of being, to either see Wendy as another person very much like myself who I can be curious about, or that I can choose to switch into this object mode where I can look at Wendy as a problem, as a nuisance, as an interruption, something that has entered into the flow of my day that I have decided is unpleasant and unwanted at that time. And that's what I've been doing. And one of the key concepts that Arbinger provides is the idea of what is called self-betrayal. That if I have the sense deep within my soul to respond to someone's humanity, which my sense is that my soul always has that sense. But because I've been so conditioned through my mind to these ideas of separation and the protection of a particularly limited ego, false identity, it's very easy for me to betray that sense, that my material mind has the ability in an instant to betray the sense of what my soul says. My soul says, oh, I love her and I'm curious about what she wants. And my mind is like, she's interrupting me and causing me problems. And unfortunately, in these cases lately, the material mind has been winning in that. The material mind then, when it betrays its sense of the right thing to do, then what it must do immediately is it must distort everything, all of my perceptions and all of my emotions, in order to justify, in order for me to feel right and good about my decision to betray my sense of the right way to be and to do in that moment. And so then I have to see Wendy a particular way, not as a full and complete human being that I love dearly, but as a problem or a nuisance in that moment. And then I also have to adjust my own feelings about myself. I'm working hard here. I'm this way. Look at me. I'm volunteering my time for these awesome things, and here she is
I'm
bugging.
Important. I'm leading this session, as you told me before. Yes.
Oh, did I tell you that? Okay, sure, I believe you.
You didn't say you were important, but you said, I'm in charge of the session.
Oh,
and
right,
even once before it even started, like sometimes I know the time.
Mm-hmm.
So if I get in 10 minutes early, I think I'm good. But yeah, it doesn't matter why I did it. And I know in my mind that I had a good reason too. But then this kind of snowballs and bounces back, because when you're resistant, then I get resistant because I feel like, well, I have a good reason to interrupt. I was actually helping him because there was a message in a group that someone couldn't get into the Zoom. And so these little things, then I want to be angry back. And it does. But that's a great example, Bill, because I know when I of all the jobs I had, a lot of times it was interruption, interruption, interruption. Your day is filled with so many interruptions. And how you respond. Are you choosing to be responsive, or am I choosing to be resistant? And I thought a lot about this, especially probably over the last few years more. Not always, because you slip back into being resistant so easily, even when you are aware of it. But often I find myself leaning into all the interruptions just because I want to be more responsive. So that's a great example because I think we all can relate to it.
Yeah. And so, again, this idea of self-betrayal, the denial of this sense of what makes sense to do in a moment according to my soul perceptions, to be loving, to be curious, to be open, to be receptive to what is coming into my perception, my field of awareness in that moment. But again, when I don't do that, when I choose to go with my material mind's programming that says, I'm important and this person's bugging me and whatever it is, then I have to distort my view of myself in a very particular way, which the plan is we're really going to dig into that into the next episode. I have to distort my perceptions of the other, whoever or whatever the other is. I have to distort my perceptions of them so that I'm not responding to what they are. I am projecting onto them this kind of two-dimensional image that has no interest in who or what they really are in that moment. And I also, in a way, distort the world, my ideas and my perceptions about the world, what kind of world I live in, what my place in that world is. And then I also, as we've demonstrated, I think even in this story, as imperfect as it is for demonstrating the choice diagram of Arbinger of self-betrayal leading to self-deception that we call resistance, emotions that you get instantaneously, these emotions that they seemingly come out of nowhere. They just happen. You have them. He made me angry. This, whatever, these feelings, these resistant, problematic emotions, disturbances in the emotional field come along with it as well. And when we talked in our episode about the world being a simulation, we are now in these episodes in our own way digging into the psychosocial dynamics of how we move from living in something that's closer to reality and then shifting our entire perspective, our worldview, our experience into this alternate reality that has nothing to do with reality. It all has to do with the thoughts and the feelings that I need in order to feel right about my inherent wrongness.
Right. And I like this idea of self-betrayal because it's almost like we are deciding, and interruptions is a good example, that what we have going on, or that my life is more important than the human being that is interrupting me. Because we don't know what the reason is. Someone cutting us off in traffic, maybe they're rushing to the hospital for something. Maybe they just found out their mother has passed away. So we don't know the bigger picture, but by getting upset, we're betraying ourselves, because I want to be that kind of person that sees everyone is a human being and we're all in it together. We're all connected. Didn't we just do an episode recently on unity?
Yeah, unity for me is part and parcel of the whole podcast. And another thing I want to bring up in this context is that the Arbinger Institute's focus is very much on interpersonal relationships.
I see.
And that's a wonderful thing. It's an important thing. But one of the seeds that I want to plant in these conversations too is that resistance is not merely a matter between people. Resistance is also something that happens within a person. For example, Stephen Pressfield, the author of The War of Art, is very good and clear about his understanding of internal resistance, where I get the sense I desire to write a symphony, let's say. But I find it really hard to write the symphony. Why is that? Well, it's because writing the symphony is way beyond my perceptions of who I am as a being, as I have defined myself in this very limited view. So, anytime that we go for any type of self growth, development, healing, and this can be material, people engage in weight loss programs, and yet they come up against resistance. They want to lose weight, and yet somehow they do all kinds of things to sabotage their efforts. My example is Bill wants to write a symphony, and yet I haven't written a note down yet. Why is that? So and so wants to do this, but they haven't done it. They want to start the great American novel, but they can't even put a letter on the page. This is internal resistance because our soul is saying, I want to express myself more. I want to be more of who I am. And the material mind is like, that's really scary because if we go there, we don't know what happens. Are we going to be criticized? Are we going to be judged? Are we going to be targeted? Are we going to fail? Are we going to lose everything? So I kind of want to plant some seeds here for that type of resistance.
Self-betrayal. That sounds like self-betrayal too, because your true self wants to do something different.
Yeah.
Unique, creative.
More expansive. It's something that is intended by my soul to take me beyond the limitations I have imposed upon myself through my limited identity. But the material mind considers that a threat because it's unknown. I don't know what's on the other side of doing that thing. So my material mind is going to engage in all kinds of self-deceptive, self-betraying actions to try to prevent me from expressing who I really am, and more of who I am is more of the fullness of my being, which includes my soul and my soul mind, my spirit and my spirit mind, even my material body and my material mind to some extent. So our material minds are not bad. They're just programmed to be afraid. So that's an example. And then
so fear is self-betrayal.
Self-betrayal comes out of fear. And fear comes from the existential terror of believing that we are separate.
Okay.
Yeah, the illusion of separation creates in the material mind a sense of the potential for annihilation, which is scary, which triggers survival, fear-based responses in the brain, particularly in the body, and then the hormones, the cascade of hormones that trigger survival fear responses.
Interesting.
And then, I'll express a few more of these just to broaden our scope on this. I've used an interpersonal example because it's available. I have two people involved in that they can provide their perspectives on it. I've given an internal example or multiple internal examples, and we all have these. Everyone I know on the planet has stuff that they really wanted to do, they were excited to do, and then they stopped, or they didn't do it, or they got right up to the finish line, and they're like, nah, I'm not going to cross the finish line.
Yeah.
So resistance can kick our butt anywhere along what we call the creative or the personal growth or development journey.
And it's could also be about failure. We fear failure. So maybe that's why we don't do things too.
That's resistance. Yeah.
Yeah. Trying
the story.
Auditioning for a play. We don't want to get rejected.
Right.
Going on a date. We don't want to get rejected.
That's all resistance. It's all rooted in fear and separation. It's all a lie. None of it's real. None of it. It's all fake. It's all part of the fabricated world of human invention. But at this very personal, intrapersonal level. Okay, so we've got the intrapersonal. We have the interpersonal we've talked about. But there is also, maybe we'll call it the transpersonal level, where resistance also incorporates how I respond to everything in my environment. That can be any type of object.
Because sometimes we're even resistant to going to a social gathering or going to work every day.
Right. And I can be resistant to, I've seen people who are resistant to their computers. And I've seen their computers pitch
or
fits.
Technology. Yeah.
I've seen people who are, there's, I consider a defining characteristic of the human condition to be our fundamental resistance to life.
Yeah.
To life as it presents itself in all of its manifold awesomeness. We're resistant to trees. We're resistant to plants. We're resistant to invertebrates, vertebrates, all these different life forms. We have all kinds of resistance toward.
So is responsiveness a synonym embracing? Embracing people, embracing work, embracing life, embracing technology?
It's an openness to it. It is
Openness.
in its own way an expression of love to that
Openness, another
which
synonym. Yeah.
to 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 that which is in our field of perception. So there's that whole aspect of creation where we resist all kinds of different aspects of creation to our detriment. I'll call that transpersonal level. There's also our resistance to divinity. There's all kinds of ideas about who divinity is. We've already had an episode on it. And I am just saddened and shocked by so much of what people express as being the nature of divinity that I have in no way perceived to be the nature of divinity. I've perceived these things to be very much a part of what human beings project as their own nature, which I would call their false identities, their own ideas of separation manifested through their own psychology and their own social interactions.
So every time we have a limited, narrow view of something, we are really suffering from resistance.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because a lot of people they say they'll look at divinity as a cosmic vending machine.
Mm-hmm.
I say a prayer to divinity and I expect to get my Mars bar.
Right.
I say a prayer to divinity for this. I expect this on the other side. That kind of, yeah, divinity, God as an object kind of a thing. Or people projecting all kinds
Or
of things
groups
like
of people,
that
or
that
groups of careers, or group, yeah.
divinity is jealous. What? Like, what? I see jealousy in human resistance. So you're telling me that divinity is resistant? Okay, all right. Yeah, I
You
can't go
mean
there.
divinity is jealous?
Yeah, to say that divinity
You
is
just
jealous
said
is saying that what's that?
You just said divinity is resistant.
Yeah.
Oh.
When someone says that divinity is jealous, they're saying divinity is in resistance. That divinity
No.
is, and when Stephen Pressfield talks about
So divinity
resistance,
is not resistant.
no, divinity is the very foundation
Yes.
of universal responsiveness. So when someone says that divinity is jealous, it's insane to me, because if divinity is jealous, we're all screwed. There's no hope. If
Or
divinity
if
is jealous,
divinity is angry or punishing me for
yeah,
something. Yes.
same deal, right? These are all human projections onto divinity where people are in resistance to divinity's beingness by, to your point, Wendy, not embracing, even being more curious, even if we can't perceive these things in their completeness, which if divinity is infinite, I wouldn't expect any of us to perceive divinity's beingness in any kind of fullness, but to not even be curious, to say, well, is divinity jealous? I mean, does this even make sense? If you follow that rabbit hole far enough, then we're toast.
Curiosity really is the key, because we can be curious even about our own feelings. Like, where did that pop up from? Why am I feeling that way? Why am I angry at this person? Why am I mad to be interrupted? I mean, really, why?
Yeah. And it's because there are parts of me that are threatened by my soul's willingness to be curious, to be open, to be embracing of this broader reality, these more inclusive possibilities of existence that may threaten my very limited, encapsulated view of myself. And I feel like I feel like it's important at this time to mention one other group in this resistance, and I'll call it our stellar friends. That there are a lot of people interested in causing human beings to be resistant to people from other planets when there is no justification for this. And so I'm just planting the seed of this in this podcast, that we need to be curious about people from other planets. We need to be curious about them. We need to be open to learning more about them and not buying these stories that are being told of, how they're causing problems, how they're threatening to us, and all these different things. All of those things are human fabrications. Yes, alien abductions are a human fabrication. We're making them up. Really awful people are making this stuff up, telling themselves that it's for the good of humanity when it's an absolute lie. Cattle mutilations, the same thing. It's all a lie invented by people in order to make us afraid of people from other planets that actually have our best interests at heart. And so I got to put it out there because this resistance,
Now,
really
wait a minute, Bill. I feel like just a slight bit that right now you're getting a little bit resistant because you seem to be so firm on your idea that people are wrong about what's out there. Because you were saying, yes, we have to believe this.
I'm inviting people to be curious and not to trust the fear responses that they're being programmed to have.
Okay. Sorry, just sensed a little bit of resistance there.
That may be true. I mean, I'm not really happy about people
not being open. You're resistant to people not being open and curious.
No, my issues, my challenges are more with those people and forces that are hell-bent on deceiving people into doing this, and that people are willing to follow those deceptions. And again, I've got some feelings about this because I was fooled by these things for a long time. I was led to believe that these counterintelligence and psychological warfare operations had something to do with extraterrestrials when they were completely human in origin. And it's heartbreaking, it's sad, and it's ongoing.
Okay, got it. I will continue to be curious about that.
Yeah. No, but you make a good point.
I mean, I felt like you were a little resistant, but
that's fine. I mean, I'm sure I am.
Because you have strong emotions coming up with it, which you just admitted. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm curious.
Yeah.
I can be curious to your feelings. No, I just sensed that a little bit.
Yeah, and part of the challenge is that a lot of the people involved in these programs, there's different levels of awareness of what is happening all up and down the chain of command. So there are people doing these things thinking that this is what's best. Like they buy the ideology. They've bought into it. They've been tricked themselves into believing these things. And then there are people that are more aware of what they're doing, but even in their own awareness, right, I can still be curious about even the power players in these scenarios and what stories they're telling themselves that allow them to justify the horrors that they are inflicting upon people on this planet and people on other planets as well. So I can be curious about how is it possible for people to make such dark choices that are so out of harmony with love and life and truth. That's something to be curious about. Like, how is that even possible?
That is the takeaway for me. Curiosity. What feelings are coming up in myself to allow me to feel this way, and even other people, being curious towards other people, other groups of people, being curious to divinity, being curious about nature and the world. That's what I'm taking away, because I don't like this resistance. I do it all the time, but I don't like it.
Yeah, and I don't see how we get to that new world without us healing these things, bringing into wholeness that which has been fractured and fragmented through the fragmenting of our beingness, of our awareness. And that this is part of the path of bringing all of those aspects of our anatomy, soul and soul mind, spirit body and spirit mind, material body and material mind, into a wholeness, into a unity of harmonious functioning, so that then we can be who we really are, as opposed to these kind of shadows or mere shells of what our true potential is.
Well, that all sounds exciting. And I know that next week we are going to continue the conversation because you have some flavors of resistance that might help explain things a little bit more. Is there anything else you wanted to share with the listeners today, Bill?
Yeah, I think next week going into the flavors will be helpful because we all have certain patterns that are more typical for us in terms of how we resist. And so
Okay.
by recognizing the constellations of feelings about ourselves, others, the world, and then the emotional package that comes with that, we can begin to see a little bit more clearly, oh, I tend to resist in these ways. So that then, again, through this raising of awareness, we can then, in the next episode after that one, hopefully talk about, well, when we recognize that we're in resistance, how do we get out? How do we escape this matrix, this false matrix of illusion, of resistance, when we recognize that we're in it? So that's kind of the idea of this arc that we're in right now, is getting more specific about, well, what does resistance look like for me? And then when I recognize that I'm in resistance, how do I get out? What do I do differently? And then how do I be differently? And how do I be differently on a more consistent basis? Meaning, how can I be more responsive on a more consistent basis and less resistant?
Well, that sounds great. And if you want more information, if you just can't wait till the next episode, you can check out the books by the Arbinger Institute. We really like, and Bill has used so much, The Anatomy of Peace and Leadership and Self-Deception.
Mhm.
So if you want to start reading those, that'll give you even more insight. But thanks so much, Bill. It's been great talking with you today.
It's been good talking to you too, Wendy.
Until next time.
Until next time. Thank you so much for listening to Wake Up Call for the Soul with Bill and Wendy. We hope you'll join us next time.